Okay, today we're talking about assessment in proficiency-based education. This is my school. It's basically a big house. We can get away with that because we're an alternative school. But that's not important. There's me on the top floor. Also not important. I teach advanced math here, and I love it. That's me with the hair. Yeah, math! At my school, all that anyone is talking about, regardless of subject area, is proficiency education. It's all the rage, even though it's been around for a while. In fact, other alternative schools in Portland are also talking about it, and it's being heralded as the way to go for our kids. So what is proficiency education? Oh, proficiency-based education. Well, let's look at an example of a typical high school student. Let's call him Stan. Stan wants to get a diploma, and in the proficiency-based system, he has to work through a checklist of standards to show that he is proficient in each one. This is where the assessment piece is big and a little bothersome. Stan shows proficiency by taking one test at a time, often a quick written test that only requires him to remember a formula or two in the case of math. If he passes, boom, check it off and move on. If not, he can practice and try again. We like this in the alternative system because efficiency is the name of the game. So let's focus on assessment. More than that, let's focus on meaningful assessment, assessment that works with what is actually going on in the brain. As a teacher, especially a math teacher, the tendency is to give out some information like a process or a formula, show a few examples, and when the kids get it back, we're excited. This, my friends, is the Western psychology model of learning, and it's what our educational system was founded on. The Western psych model basically says that teachers are going to give students information, that's input, and the student then reproduces that information for us, that's output. And we have success! There are only two tiers to the model, input and output. Input and output. The assumption is if you can give me a product, then you must have learned the concept, right? Well, no. If I give a student this kind of input, formulas and examples, and then the test is the same exact thing, more formulas and examples, what are we actually assessing? The answer is in how the brain actually learns. The senses bring in sensory input and transport that information to the brain. The brain takes all of that input and turns it into meaningful patterns. These patterns are then layered and layered and layered until, voila, they form a concept. The brain then names this concept with language, which allows the student to use language to talk and write more about the concept, creating other concepts in relation to the original one, which are named with more language so you can deepen the other concept, and etc., etc., etc. Now the brain goes into Dr. Arwood's spiral of concept acquisition. That was an echo there. The brain will acquire a concept, continue to explore it, get some feedback and drop down an understanding, then continue to use language and incorporate the feedback, deepen the concept, so on and so on and so forth. You never stop deepening a concept, ever. Okay, back to assessment. The current practice, as I mentioned earlier, is based on the Western psych model. I show you something, you show me something, and we'll call it good. The problem is this. If a student is only regurgitating the pattern, then how do you know if he has acquired the concept? I'm going to tell you. You don't know. Patterns are only committed to short-term memory, while concepts get tucked away in long-term semantic memory. How many of you have had the situation where your students ace a test, and then a month or 2 months later, they have to pull up those old concepts and they are gone? I know, this leads to lots of frustration and anger and rage. Well, they probably weren't concepts in the brain in your students in the first place. And you probably assessed them wrong. You're bad. So, how do you assess? Well, think about this. You want to assess the concepts, not the patterns. How can you access the concepts? Here's a hint. Exactly right! It's language. A test that just asks for patterns will assess just that, the patterns. But a test that has a student use their language to explain their reasoning while using a concept, that's an entirely different ballgame. So, technique number 1, requires students to explain their reasoning with language, either speaking or writing. That's how you assess the concept. Next, you should be using new and complex problems in assessment. This is for 2 reasons. If there is a crazy problem that requires a student to go beyond just the formula and requires them to pull on other concepts, apply the formula in a different way, and maybe even synthesize a new formula, Pattern Boy isn't going to do well because his patterns don't fit in the new situation. He's stuck. Concept boy will do just fine because he has a deep understanding of the material, and you will be able to tell who has the material down. This also provides a great opportunity for you to provide some meaningful feedback to pattern boy to help him assign meaning to other patterns, layer the patterns, and get him to a concept. The other reason is because the brain is full of concept. No concept exists in isolation. When you are able to connect one to another, you are deepening both of the concepts. If during an assessment you have a student connect something to another concept, not only are you effectively assessing how deep his concepts are, but you are actually helping him deepen the concepts even more by providing a connection. Look at that brain go! The assessment is part of the learning. Amazing. So, technique number 2, use unfamiliar and complex problems, assessments for learning. Wow. The last technique we'll talk about has students assisting in the design of the assessments. If you encourage students to write down their own questions, find new ways to apply concepts, work with peers to identify and solve a problem, the brain has to go back to that concept and do some critical thinking about it. Again, pattern boy is going to be stuck because he will just bring up the pattern in different ways. We're on to you, pattern boy. As concept boy thinks about new application, he's going to connect the concept at hand to other concepts. More deepening. An added benefit of this method is that the brain has to self-assess what it knows about a concept, which is a valuable skill for students to have after they leave high school. So, technique number 3, have students help design the assessment, with the extra benefit of self-assessment. Okie doke, that is all the time we have for right now, so I will open it up to questions. Thanks.